You are not here to live small. You are here to build, to conquer, to rise beyond every limit placed on you. That was the creed of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who reshaped history through sheer force of will. He didn't see obstacles, he saw targets, and he hit them one by one. In this message, you'll learn how to ignite your ambition, craft strategy from vision, and march straight through the impossible. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind. And tell us, where are you watching from? Look around you. What do you see? A world of people sleepwalking through existence, people who have accepted the chains of mediocrity, who have surrendered to smallness. Is that what you want? Is that why you were born? I tell you now, you were not born to live small. Every great person who has ever lived understood this truth. I, Napoleon, rose from obscurity on a small island to command empires, not because I was given permission, not because fate chose me, but because I refused to accept the boundaries others had drawn around my life. The mediocre mind looks at limitation and says, "This is my cage." The imperial mind looks at the same limitation and says, "This is my first conquest." Here's what most people don't understand. Greatness is not given. It is seized with both hands, with force of will that terrifies the ordinary. When I was a young officer, they laughed at my accent. They mocked my stature. They dismissed my ideas. What did I do? I did not beg for their approval. I did not shrink myself to fit their expectations. I grew. I expanded. I forced the world to adjust to my vision, not the other way around. You must do the same. Society has programmed you since birth. It has whispered in your ear, be reasonable, be practical, know your place. These are the mantras of the mediocre. These are the lullabies that put dreams to sleep. Wake up. Your life is not a rehearsal. There is no second performance. The fire you feel when you imagine a greater life, that is not delusion. That is your nature calling to you. That is the truth of who you are, buried under years of conditioning. Do you think the eagle was meant to hop along the ground? Do you think the lion was born to be a house pet? Then why do you accept a life smaller than what burns inside you? I conquered Europe not because I had more resources than my enemies. I won because while they thought in terms of limitations, I thought only of possibilities. While they defended what was, I created what could be. You must adopt this mindset. See possibilities where others see walls. But let me ask you this. What stands between you and greatness right now? Is it circumstance? Is it other people? Or is it the voice in your mind that says, who am I to dream so large? Silence that voice. Kill it. It is the enemy of everything you could become. When I stood before the Alps, a barrier that generals, for thousands of years considered impassable in winter, I did not see an obstacle. I saw an opportunity to do what others called impossible. And so we marched, through snow, through ice, through terrain that reasonable men would never attempt. And on the other side of that impossible barrier was Italy. And victory. What is your Alps? What barrier stands before you that others claim cannot be crossed? That is precisely where you must march. The world does not reward reasonable men. It does not build monuments to those who stayed within the lines. History remembers those who redrew the lines. You feel it, don't you? That hunger for more. That dissatisfaction with ordinariness. Good. That hunger is your compass. That dissatisfaction is your ally. When I was imprisoned on Elba, they thought I was finished. They thought the story was over. But in my mind, it was merely a chapter. I escaped, I returned. With a small force, I marched back to Paris, gathering an army with each step, reclaiming an empire through sheer force of will. This is how you must. Think. No setback is final unless you accept it as such. No defeat is permanent unless you stop marching. Your greatness is not one grand moment. It is built in daily decisions, in moments when you choose courage over comfort, when you choose advancement over acceptance, when you choose to be extraordinary in a world designed for the ordinary. I tell you this, the greatest crime in life is not failure. It is surrender. It is accepting a station beneath your capabilities. It is dying with your greatest self still buried inside you. So, stand tall. Breathe fire into your ambitions. Let your dreams terrify those around you with their scale. Let your vision make the small-minded uncomfortable. You were born to command your destiny, not to request it politely. You were born to conquer your circumstances, not to be conquered by them. This is the mindset of empire builders. This is the psychology of conquerors. You were not born to live small. You were born for glory. Seize it. Here's what most people don't understand. No one is coming to build your empire for you. Listen carefully. The dream that burns inside you, that vision of greatness, of achievement, of conquest, it is yours alone. Not just to imagine, but to execute. Not just to desire, but to demand from reality. I rose from nothing. A minor nobleman from Corsica, an island most of France barely acknowledged. I spoke with an accent they mocked. I lacked the connections, the wealth, the privilege of my peers, but I understood one thing they did not. If I did not take responsibility for my ambition, no one would. When I looked at the chaos of revolutionary France, I did not wait for an invitation to lead. I did not ask permission to rise. I seized the opportunity. I claimed the responsibility that others feared. Your dream must be treated the same way. Do you wait for the world to recognize your potential? Do you expect others to clear the path for your advance? This is the thinking of the defeated before the battle has begun. The dream is your burden. The dream is your privilege. The dream is your responsibility. But let me ask you this. What happens to most dreams? They die, not by assassination, but by abandonment. Their owners treat them like wishes, like passing fantasies, not like sacred duties. When I desired to be emperor, I did not simply hope for it. I did not merely wish for it. I moved toward it with every decision, every battle, every alliance, every study, every sleepless night planning campaigns. My ambition was not a hobby. It was my occupation. Is your dream your occupation? Or is it merely your entertainment? The difference is responsibility. When you take full responsibility for your ambition, excuses evaporate. Blame becomes useless. The concept of fair becomes irrelevant. Was it fair that I faced the combined armies of Europe, often outnumbered, outgunned? Was it fair that I had to create new tactics, new approaches to warfare? No, but fairness is the concern of the weak. Results are the currency of the strong. Your dream does not care about your excuses. Your potential does not recognize your complaints. They demand action. They demand ownership. When my generals told me we couldn't cross the Alps in winter, I didn't blame the mountains. I didn't curse the weather. I took responsibility for finding a way through, and we marched over what others called impossible. This is the mindset you must adopt. When obstacles appear, and they will appear, you don't blame them for existing. You take responsibility for overcoming them. Most people outsource their dreams. They say, I would achieve greatness if only my circumstances were different. If only I had their advantages. If only the world were more accommodating. This is the language of surrender disguised as reasoning. I created my circumstances. When the Directory stood in my way in France, I didn't complain about the unfairness of the political system. I created a new system. I made myself emperor. This is responsibility in its purest form. Not just accepting what is yours to do, but claiming what is yours to create. Your dream is not a lottery ticket where you passively wait to see if fate has selected you for greatness. Your dream is a campaign map. It requires strategy. It demands resources. It needs leadership. And you are the only general who can provide these things. When I was exiled to Elba, the world thought Napoleon was finished. But I knew different. I knew my destiny was my responsibility, not the world's to decide. So I escaped. I returned. I reclaimed what was mine because I never surrendered the responsibility for my ambition. This is the secret that separates those who merely dream from those who conquer their dreams. Ownership. Own your vision so completely that it becomes inseparable from your identity. Let it consume you. Let it drive you. Let it transform you. When you truly take responsibility for your dream, failure becomes merely information. Setbacks become education. Delays become opportunities to refine your strategy. I lost battles. Every conqueror does. But I never lost the war within myself. I never surrendered the responsibility for my destiny to outside forces. The path to your conquest will not be smooth. It will not be straight. There will be reversals, betrayals, and moments when all seems lost. In these dark moments, remember, no one is coming to rescue your ambition. No one will value your dream as you do. No one will fight for your vision with the same fire. This is not a burden. This is your greatest power. Because when the responsibility is entirely yours, so too is the glory. Take ownership of your dream like a sacred duty. Guard it with the vigilance of an emperor protecting his realm. Feed it with the dedication of a general supplying his army. The dream is your responsibility, not just to conceive, but to execute. Not just to desire, but to manifest. When you embrace this truth, when you stop waiting for permission, for perfect conditions, for validation, you become unstoppable. Because you no longer depend on anything outside yourself to advance. This is how empires are built. This is how history is made. This is how the impossible becomes merely the difficult, and the difficult becomes merely the done. The dream is your responsibility. Now march toward it as if your life depends on it. Because it does. Remove the word impossible from your vocabulary. Burn it. Bury it. Forget you ever knew it. This single word has killed more greatness, strangled more ambition, and prevented more achievement than any other force in human history. Napoleon, did not conquer Europe by accepting the boundaries of the possible. I redefined them. When they said it was impossible to move an army across the Alps in winter, I marched my men through snow and ice. When they said it was impossible to defeat the Austrians at Marengo with inferior numbers, I changed the tactics of warfare. When they said it was impossible for a Corsican outsider to rule France, I crowned myself emperor. Here's what most people don't understand. Impossible is not a fact. It is an opinion. It is not a declaration of reality. It is a surrender to reality as it exists now. The masses live imprisoned by this word. They see the walls of impossible, and they retreat. They accept. They surrender before firing a single shot. But history is not written by those who surrender to limitations. History is written by those who defy them. When I faced the combined might of Europe allied against me, conventional wisdom said my defeat was inevitable, impossible to overcome. Yet I studied, I planned, I moved with speed that confounded my enemies, and I won victory after victory against superior forces. Why? Because I refused to accept the verdict of impossible. The human mind craves certainty. It seeks the comfort of clear boundaries. This can be done. This cannot be done. How simple, how reassuring, how deadly to greatness. But let me ask you this. How do you know what is truly impossible? Have you tested every method? Have you explored every approach? Have you pushed beyond every boundary? Or have you simply accepted the chorus of doubt that surrounds every bold ambition? The greatest victories in history came from those who challenged us, what everyone else knew to be impossible. They said it was impossible to create an empire that stretched across Europe in mere years. Yet I did it. They said it was impossible to create a new legal code that would endure for centuries. Yet my Napoleonic code still forms the basis of law in dozens of nations today. They said it was impossible to return from exile and reclaim an empire with a small band of loyal soldiers. Yet, when I escaped from Elba, the armies sent to capture me instead joined me, and I marched back to Paris in triumph. The boundaries of the possible are pushed by those who refuse to acknowledge them. Your mind will try to protect you from disappointment. It will whisper, "This cannot be done. This is too difficult. This is impossible. These thoughts feel like wisdom. They feel like prudence. But they are the advanced scouts of defeat. Drive them back. Refuse them entry to your mind. When I was a young officer studying military tactics, I did not accept that the established methods were the only methods. I questioned. I innovated. I created new approaches that my enemies could not anticipate, because they were bound by their conception of the possible. This is how you must think. Question every limit. Challenge every boundary. Test every wall to see if it will fall. The ordinary mind says, "This is impossible because it has never been done." The imperial mind says, "This has never been done," which means the glory of being. First belongs to me. Understand this. Most impossibilities are merely difficulties that others lack the will to overcome. They are locked doors for which others were unwilling to forge the key. When I faced the British at sea, they had the superior navy. Convention said it was impossible to defeat them. Rather than accept this, I developed plans to change the nature of the conflict. I would strike at their colonies, their trade, their economy. I would make the contest about more than ships. This is the mindset you must develop. When direct assault against an impossible barrier fails, change the nature of the battle. Find the indirect approach. Create a new paradigm. The word impossible assumes that the future must obey the limitations of the past. But all of human progress comes from proving this assumption wrong. They said it was impossible to govern a nation as vast and diverse as France under a single coherent system. Yet I created institutions, laws, and structures that unified and modernized the state. When you encounter what others call impossible, ask yourself, what assumption is this based on? What rule am I allowing to limit me? What tradition am I treating as immutable law? Then attack that assumption. Break that rule. Challenge that tradition. The truly impossible is far rarer than you have been taught to believe. What most call impossible is simply the untried, the difficult, the requiring of exceptional effort. Are you willing to attempt what others declare impossible? Are you willing to endure the mockery, the doubt, the resistance that always faces those who push beyond accepted boundaries? If not, then surrender your dreams now. Accept mediocrity. Join the masses who live within the prison of the possible. But if you are willing to burn the word impossible from your mind, to treat it as the lie it often is, then you have taken the first step toward conquest. Remember this: every great achievement in human history was impossible until it was done. Every empire was a wild ambition until it was built. Every revolution was a madman's fantasy until it succeeded. The difference between the possible and the impossible is not in reality. It is in your mind. It is in your will. It is in your refusal to accept defeat before the battle has even begun. Did not become emperor by respecting the boundaries others had established. I became emperor by burning those boundaries to ash and marching my ambition across the scorched ground where they once stood. Do the same with your life, with your dreams, with your ambitions. Burn the word impossible. And in the space it once occupied in your mind, plant the imperial flag of your conquest. The world bows before audacity. Remember this truth: I did not ask France if I could become its emperor. I seized the crown and placed it upon my own head. Pope Pius VII stood by, expecting to perform the coronation, as tradition demanded. But I took the crown from his hands and crowned myself. This was not mere theater. This was the physical manifestation of a fundamental truth. Greatness does not ask permission. Here's what most people don't understand. While the masses wait for approval, the conqueror acts. While the ordinary seek consensus, the extraordinary create new realities that others must then adapt to. The approval seeker says, "May I?" The conqueror says, "I will." Which are you? When I was a young general facing the Austrian army in Italy, conventional military wisdom dictated caution. My forces were outnumbered. My supplies were limited. The reasonable approach was to fortify, to defend, to minimize losses. Instead, I attacked. I moved with such speed, such decisiveness, such audacity, that my enemies were paralyzed. They could not comprehend a commander who would make such bold moves against superior forces. By the time they adjusted their thinking, I had already won. This is the power of audacity. It creates confusion in your opponents. It generates momentum for your advance. It clears obstacles through sheer force of unexpected action. But let me ask you this. What holds you back from acting with audacity in your own life? Is it fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of standing alone? These fears are the prison guards of mediocrity. They keep you safely contained within the boundaries of the ordinary. Break free. Act with the audacity that your vision demands. When I returned from Egypt to find France in chaos under the Directory, I did not politely suggest reforms. I did not gradually work my way up through the political ranks. I executed a coup d'etat. I acted with audacity because the moment demanded it. Your moment demands it too. Society has trained you to seek approval before action, to consult, to build consensus, to ensure everyone is comfortable with your advance. This is the path to stagnation. This is how dreams die, smothered by committee, suffocated by the need for universal approval. Audacity cuts through this paralysis like a blade. When I reformed the French legal system, creating the Code Napoleon, I did not spend years building agreement among every faction. I assembled the best legal minds, gave them clear direction, and demanded results. I acted with the audacity of a leader who knows that progress cannot wait for everyone to feel ready. The same principle applies to your life, your goals, your vision. The world responds to decisive action. It respects bold moves. It rewards those who create new realities rather than waiting for consensus about existing ones. This does not mean blind recklessness. My audacity was always calculated, always strategic, always serving a greater vision. When I crossed the bridge at Arcole under heavy fire, leading my troops by personal example, this was not foolhardy courage, it was calculated audacity. I knew the psychological impact it would have, both on my men who would be inspired and on my enemies who would be demoralized. Your audacity must be equally strategic, equally purposeful. But it must be audacity nonetheless. Understand this. The world is full of approval seekers. People who will not move without permission. People who need the comfort of consensus. These people rarely create anything of significance. They rarely leave a mark on history. The mark is made by those who dare, those who act, those who move while others are still deliberating whether movement is proper. When I reorganized the educational system of France, creating lycées and grandes écoles that still exist today, many traditionalists opposed these changes. Had I sought their approval first, had I waited for consensus, these institutions would never have been created. Instead, I acted, I implemented, I built. And now, centuries later, these systems still stand. This is the legacy of audacity over approval. In your own life, in your own pursuits, which path will you choose? Will you be the one forever seeking validation before action? Or will you be the one whose actions force others to adapt to the new reality you've created? The approval seeker lives in reaction to the world as it exists. The audacious reshape the world to match their vision. When I standardized weights and measures across France, implementing the metric system, there was resistance. There were those who clung to the old, inconsistent methods. Had I sought their approval, France would have remained fragmented by 100 different local measurement systems. Instead, I imposed a rational universal standard. Today, the metric system I championed is used by nearly every nation on Earth. This is the reach of audacity. This is its lasting power. The need for approval is a chain around your potential. It makes your advance dependent on the courage of others, most of whom lack the vision you possess. Why would you surrender your momentum to those who cannot see what you see? I did not. When I created the Bank of France, stabilizing a currency that had been devastated by years of revolutionary chaos. Financial conservatives were horrified. They warned of disaster. They predicted ruin. Had I required their approval, France's economy would have continued its collapse. Instead, I acted with the audacity that the moment required. I created an institution that still stands, that helped build a modern economy that outlived its critics by centuries. Your vision deserves the same audacity. Your goals demand it. The world does not reward those who wait politely for their turn. It rewards those who step forward and claim what others lack the courage to reach for. Remember, history does not remember those who waited for permission. It remembers those who acted with such audacity that they gave permission to others to follow. Be audacious. Be decisive. Be the force that others must adapt to, not the one constantly adapting to others. This is how empires are built. This is how legacies are created. This is how the impossible becomes inevitable. Audacity over approval, always. Your will is the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. Sharpen it, strengthen it, learn to wield it with precision. I, Napoleon, conquered Europe, not because I had the largest armies, not because I had the most resources. I conquered because my will was unbreakable when others' resolve shattered. Here's what most people don't understand. In any contest, in any challenge, in any pursuit, it is not merely strength against strength or skill against skill. It is will against will, and the stronger will prevails. At the Battle of Austerlitz, I faced the combined armies of Russia and Austria. They outnumbered my forces. They had the advantage of position. By conventional military calculations, they should have triumphed. But I had studied, I had planned, and above all, I had cultivated an unbreakable will, both in myself and in my men. When the moment of crisis came, when the battle hung in the balance, it was this will that tipped the scales. My enemies hesitated. They doubted. Their will faltered. Mine did not. The result? One of the most decisive victories in military history. Your battles may not be fought on fields with armies, but the principle remains the same. Your will, your capacity to persist, to endure, to advance when others retreat. This is what separates the conqueror from the conquered. But let me ask you this. How strong is your will? When obstacles arise, when resistance stiffens, when the path forward seems blocked, do you advance or retreat? Do you persist or surrender? The ordinary person sees difficulty and seeks an easier path. The extraordinary person sees the same difficulty and sharpens their will against it. When I was exiled to Elba, the world thought Napoleon was finished. My enemies believed they had finally broken my will. They were wrong. Even in defeat, my will remained unbroken. I planned, I prepared, and when the moment came, I escaped, returned to France, and reclaimed power. This is the nature of an imperial will. It does not recognize final defeat. It does not accept permanent limitations. It treats every setback as temporary, every obstacle as movable, every barrier as eventually penetrable. You must forge this same quality within yourself. The weak-willed see one failed attempt and conclude that success is impossible. The strong-willed see the same failure and conclude only that this particular approach did not work. They adjust, they adapt, they attack again from a different angle. During the Egyptian campaign, my army faced scorching heat, disease, and fierce resistance. Many generals would have abandoned the effort. But I understood that these hardships were tests of will, not reasons for retreat. We endured, we adapted, we persevered. Your will must be equally resilient, equally adaptable, equally persistent. Understand this. Your will is not merely stubbornness. It is not blind persistence regardless of evidence. A true imperial will is intelligent, strategic. It knows when to push directly forward and when to find an indirect path to the same goal. When Britain controlled the seas, making direct invasion impossible, I did not waste my strength in futile naval battles. I adapted my strategy. I created the continental system to attack Britain economically rather than militarily. I adjusted my approach while keeping my will fixed on the ultimate objective. This is how you must think. Your will remains unbroken, but your tactics evolve. Your determination is constant, but your methods adjust to reality. Most people confuse flexibility of approach with weakness of will. They believe that adapting their methods means compromising their goals. This is the thinking of amateurs, not conquerors. The strongest will is both unyielding in its objective and infinitely adaptable in its execution. When I faced the Russian winter during the 1812 campaign, nature itself became my enemy. The cold killed more of my men than Russian bullets. This was a harsh lesson in the limits of even the strongest human will when pitted against implacable natural forces. But note this, even this catastrophic setback did not break my will. I retreated, regrouped, and raised new armies. Within months, I was again leading forces into battle. Your will must have this same quality, the ability to absorb terrible setbacks without surrendering the larger vision. The world will test your will. It will place obstacles in your path. It will arrange circumstances that seem designed to break your resolve. These are not accidents. These are not misfortunes. These are the inevitable trials that separate those who merely wish for greatness from those who are willing to pay its price. When I fought the Battle of Marengo, the situation appeared hopeless by midday. My forces were scattered. The Austrians were advancing. Many commanders would have accepted defeat, but I refused. I rallied my troops. I maintained my composure. I projected absolute certainty of victory even in the face of apparent defeat. And by evening, the battle had turned. What had seemed like certain defeat became one of my most famous victories. This is the power of an unbreakable will. It can transform circumstances that appear hopeless. It can reverse momentum that seems irreversible. Your will must become a force so tangible, so evident, that it affects not only your actions, but the actions of everyone around you. When my soldiers looked to me, they did not see doubt. They did not see hesitation. They saw absolute conviction. And this strengthened their own resolve. Your will must have the same quality. The ability to strengthen the resolve of allies, to inspire confidence in followers, to create certainty in the midst of chaos. But this kind of will is not born. It is forged. It is developed through conscious effort, through deliberate testing, through willingly embracing challenges that would break a lesser resolve. When I was a young officer, I subjected myself to rigorous study. While others slept, I read. While others socialized, I analyzed military campaigns of the past. I denied myself comforts. I embraced discipline. In this way, I forged a will that would later move nations. You must do the same. Test your will on small challenges before the great tests arrive. Strengthen it daily through discipline, through focus, through denying yourself the easy path when the difficult path leads to growth. Remember this, in the final analysis, all other factors being equal, it is will that decides victory or defeat. It is will that determines who advances and who retreats. It is will that separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. Your will is a weapon, the most powerful in your arsenal. Sharpen it, strengthen it, learn to wield it with precision, and no obstacle will stand before you for long. Vision without strategy is merely a dream. Ambition without structure collapses under its own weight. If your will is the weapon, then strategy is the skill that aims it. I, Napoleon, did not conquer Europe through passion alone. I conquered through meticulous planning, through strategic thinking that outmaneuvered opponents before the first shot was fired. Here's what most people don't understand. The battle is often won or lost before it begins. In the planning, in the positioning, in the preparation. While my enemies reacted, I anticipated. While they defended their positions, I created new realities they were unprepared for. This is strategy in its purest form, the art of controlling the environment rather than being controlled by it. When I faced the Austrians at Ulm in 1805. I did not simply march my army directly against theirs. I studied the terrain, the supply routes, the psychology of my opponent. Then, I executed a brilliant flanking maneuver that forced their surrender without a major battle. This victory wasn't the result of superior numbers or luck. It was the product of superior strategy, your ambitions, your goals, your dreams. They all require the same strategic thinking. But let me ask you this. Do you have a strategy for your conquests? Or do you merely have desires? Do you have a structured plan for achievement? Or do you have only vague hopes? The difference between the strategist and the dreamer is the difference between the conqueror and the conquered. When I prepared for battle, I created detailed plans. I accounted for terrain, weather, supply lines, morale, and the tendencies of enemy commanders. I considered not just what I wanted to happen, but what could happen, good and bad. I developed contingencies. I built flexibility into my approach. This is how you must approach your own campaigns. The amateur focuses solely on the goal. The strategist maps the entire journey. Strategy begins with absolute clarity about the objective. What exactly are you trying to achieve? Define it with precision. Not success, but specific, measurable victory. When I invaded Italy in 1796, my objective was clear. Defeat the Austrian forces, conquer the northern Italian territories, and force a peace treaty favorable to France. This clarity of purpose informed every decision, every movement, every engagement. Your objective must be equally clear, equally specific, equally measurable. Once the objective is defined, strategy demands an unflinching assessment of reality. What resources do you have? What opposition will you face? What terrain must you cross? What are your strengths? What are your vulnerabilities? Self-deception is the enemy of strategy. Wishful thinking is the poison of planning. When I planned the Egyptian campaign, I did not pretend the desert would be kind. I did not imagine the British Navy would conveniently disappear. I faced reality as it was, not as I wished it to be. Only then could I develop a strategy that had any chance of success. You must bring this same unflinching honesty to your own campaigns. See clearly, plan accordingly. With objective defined and reality assessed, strategy demands the division of the large into the small. No great victory is achieved in a single stroke. It is the accumulation of smaller victories, each building momentum toward the ultimate goal. When I conquered Italy, I did not attempt to defeat all Austrian forces in one decisive battle. I divided my campaign into phases. I identified key strategic points. I created a sequence of victories, each setting up the next. Your strategy must have this same structure. Break your objective into phases, create milestones, establish checkpoints, transform the overwhelming into the manageable. Strategy also requires the identification of decisive points. Those places where effort applied will yield the greatest results. Not all battles are equally important. Not all engagements equally decisive. When I fought the Battle of Austerlitz, I identified the Pratzen Heights as the key to the entire battlefield. Whoever controlled this position would control the battle. I focused my main effort there, and the result was total victory. Your strategy must identify similar decisive points in your own pursuits. Where can effort be applied for maximum effect? What key positions must be taken? What critical resources must be secured? The amateur spreads effort evenly. The strategist concentrates force at the decisive point. But strategy is not merely about planning, it is about execution. The greatest strategy on paper means nothing without disciplined implementation. When I moved my armies, I ensured clear communication of orders. I established timetables. I created accountability. I maintained discipline. The result was an almost mechanical precision in execution that my enemies could not match. Your strategy requires this same attention to execution. Set deadlines, establish metrics, create accountability, both for yourself and for those who support your vision. The strategic mind also anticipates resistance. It expects setbacks. It prepares for them before they occur. When I fought in Russia, I failed to adequately prepare for the severity of the winter. I did not establish sufficient supply lines. The result was catastrophe. This failure of strategic foresight cost me an empire. Learn from my mistake. Anticipate obstacles. Prepare contingencies. Build redundancies into your plan. The greatest strategists also understand timing, when to advance rapidly, when to consolidate gains, when to retreat temporarily to prepare for a greater advance. When I pursued the retreating Russians at Austerlitz, I did not chase them beyond the point of strategic value. I secured my victory, then consolidated my position. I understood that overextension is the disease of the ambitious but strategically naive. Your strategy must have the same sensitivity to timing. Know when to push forward. Know when to secure what you've gained. Know when strategic retreat serves the greater advance. Finally, strategy requires constant reassessment. No plan survives contact with reality unchanged. The strategist adapts, evolves, improves the plan based on new information. When I found my initial strategy in Egypt was not succeeding, I did not stubbornly persist in failure. I adjusted. I adapted. I found new approaches. Your strategy must have this same flexibility. Treat your plan as a living document, not a sacred text. Revise it as circumstances change. Improve it as you learn. This is the skeleton of victory, the strategic framework that turns dreams into achievements, visions into conquests. Without it, your ambition is merely noise. Your will, however strong, is directionless force. With it, you become unstoppable. You transform hope into inevitability. You convert possibility into reality. Strategy is not merely planning. It is the architecture of achievement. Master it, and you master your destiny. Conquerors don't wait, they strike. Movement creates momentum, and momentum changes everything. I, Napoleon, did not rise to power through contemplation alone. I did not become emperor through careful deliberation. I acted, I moved, I struck, while others hesitated. Here's what most people don't understand. There is a physics to achievement. A body at rest stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion. Your dreams, your ambitions, your goals, they obey these same laws. The greatest barrier to achievement is not external resistance. It is internal inertia. When I seized power in France through the coup of 18 Brumaire, I did not have a perfect plan. I did not have guaranteed support. I had opportunity and I had instinct, and I acted while others deliberated. This is the mindset of the conqueror. Action precedes perfect certainty. Movement begins before complete clarity. But let me ask you this. What are you waiting for? What perfect condition? What complete guarantee? What absolute certainty are you demanding before you move toward your ambition? The paralyzed mind says, I will act when I am ready. The imperial mind says, I will become ready through action. When I fought the Battle of Marengo, initial reports from the battlefield were dire. My forces were being pushed back. Defeat seemed imminent. Many commanders would have retreated, regrouped, deliberated. I ordered an immediate counterattack. This decisive action turned the tide. What appeared to be inevitable defeat became historic victory. The lesson: momentum is not just a result of victory. It is often the cause of it. Your goals, your dreams, your ambitions, they require this same decisiveness, this same bias toward action. This same understanding that momentum itself creates possibilities that deliberation never can. The ordinary mind believes action follows confidence. First I must feel certain, then I will act. The extraordinary mind understands that confidence follows action. First I will act, then certainty will come. When I reformed the French educational system, creating institutions that still exist today, I did not wait for unanimous agreement on the perfect approach. I did not demand absolute certainty before beginning. I acted. I implemented. I created momentum that carried the reforms forward, even against resistance. Your vision requires this same approach. Begin before you feel completely ready. Move before the path is entirely clear. Create momentum that will carry you through resistance. Understand this. Action has a clarifying effect that contemplation can never achieve. There are questions that can only be answered through movement, problems that can only be solved through engagement. When I invaded Russia, all the planning, all the deliberation, all the careful calculation could not reveal what the actual campaign would uncover. Only through action did the true nature of the challenge emerge. Yes, that campaign ended in disaster, but the principle remained sound. There are truths that can only be discovered through movement, insights that can only be gained through action. Your vision deserves the same commitment to movement. Begin, act, move. Let clarity emerge through engagement rather than waiting for it to arrive through contemplation. The paralysis of analysis, this is the disease of the ambitious but timid. They study, they plan, they prepare, but they never cross the line into decisive action, and so their dreams remain theoretical, their potential unrealized. I did not build an empire through theory. I built it through action, through decisions made and orders given and battles fought, through momentum created and sustained and leveraged. The same principle applies to your life, your goals, your ambitions. Movement creates options that stillness cannot. When my armies marched, when they created momentum, new possibilities emerged. Enemy weaknesses were revealed. Unexpected opportunities appeared. Allies were inspired to join. These advantages could never have been calculated in advance. They existed only in the realm of action. Your life will reveal the same phenomenon. Begin moving toward your goal, and paths will appear that were invisible from your starting point. Opportunities will emerge that could not have been anticipated. Momentum itself will create new realities, but this requires the courage to begin before all questions are answered, before all resources are secured, before all risks are eliminated. The ordinary person waits for the perfect moment. The extraordinary person creates the perfect moment through imperfect action. When I reorganized the French government, establishing systems that brought order to post-revolutionary chaos, I did not have complete plans for every department, every function, every process. I had direction, I had vision, and I began. The details emerged through implementation. The refinements came through experience. Your vision deserves this same respect for momentum over perfection. Begin with what you know. Start with what you have. Move in the direction of your goal. The path will become clearer with each step. Momentum is not merely physical, it is psychological, it is emotional. When my armies won initial victories, however, small confidence grew, belief strengthened, resolve hardened. Each action created not just physical advancement, but psychological momentum. Your journey will reveal the same truth. Small victories create belief. Initial successes build confidence. Early momentum generates the emotional fuel for later, greater challenges. This is why waiting for the perfect moment is so destructive. It denies you the psychological momentum that only action can create. The waiting mind says, "When I have complete confidence, I will act." The imperial mind says, "When I act, I will build confidence." When I established the Napoleonic Code, creating a legal system that still influences dozens of nations today, I did not wait for every legal scholar to approve. I did not demand perfect consensus before implementation. I acted. I created momentum. And that momentum carried the project forward, even against significant resistance. Your vision demands this same commitment to action over perfect consensus. Begin. Move. Create momentum that will carry your dream forward even when resistance arises. Understand this. Momentum itself becomes a resource. It becomes an asset that can overcome obstacles that would stop a stationary object. A force in motion can break through barriers that would prevent a force at rest from even beginning. When I returned from Elba and marched toward Paris to reclaim power, it was momentum that carried me forward. With each mile, with each town, with each battalion that joined my cause, momentum grew. What began as a seemingly impossible quest became an unstoppable force. Your goals can harness the same power. Begin moving, however modestly, and momentum will build. What starts as a small step can become an unstoppable advance if you understand and respect the power of continuous action. But momentum requires one thing above all. You must begin. You must take the first step. You must cross the line from contemplation into action. The greatest tragedy in life is not failure. It is the failure to begin, the failure to create momentum toward what matters most. I did not become emperor by contemplating power. I became emperor by taking action toward power, by creating momentum that eventually became unstoppable. Your destiny awaits the same decision, not to wait until the moment is perfect, but to make the moment perfect through decisive action. Begin, move, act. Let momentum carry you toward greatness. The world calls it obsession. History calls it greatness. Napoleon did not build an empire through casual interest. I did not reshape Europe through moderate commitment. I was consumed by my vision, possessed by my ambition. What lesser minds call obsession, I recognize as the necessary fuel of extraordinary achievement. Here's what most people don't understand. Moderation is the enemy of greatness. Balance is the refuge of the mediocre. The truly exceptional are never evenly distributed in their energies. They are focused to the point of obsession on what matters most. When I studied military strategy as a young officer, I did not do so casually. While others slept, I read. While others socialized, I analyzed. While others sought comfort, I sought knowledge. I dedicated myself with a singularity of focus that many found disturbing, even unhealthy. This obsession became my advantage. This imbalance became my edge. But let me ask you this. What have you ever achieved through moderation? What greatness has ever emerged from careful balance? What history has ever been made by those who carefully distributed their energy equally across all aspects of life? The ordinary mind fears obsession. The extraordinary mind embraces it. When I planned campaigns, I immersed myself completely in the details, the terrain, the weather patterns, the supply routes, the psychology of opposing commanders. I thought of little else. I dreamed of the battlefields before I ever saw them. I considered every contingency, every possibility, every angle. This total immersion, this obsession, created victories that appeared magical to those who did not understand its source. Your ambitions, your goals, your dreams, they deserve the same total commitment, this same complete immersion, this same single-minded focus that others will call obsession, and you will recognize as the price of exceptional achievement. Understand this. The world is designed to pull you toward distraction, toward moderation, toward healthy balance. This is the path to mediocrity disguised as wisdom. When I reformed the French governmental system, creating institutions and structures that brought order to chaos, I did not approach this task as one of many equal priorities. I threw myself into it completely. I considered every aspect, every detail, every implication. My mind was consumed by the challenge. The result? Systems so effective they still exist in modified form today, centuries later. Your vision demands this same level of commitment, this same depth of focus, this same willingness to become obsessed with its achievement. The dilettante samples many interests. The master obsesses over one. The dabbler touches many areas lightly. The conqueror drills deep in what matters most. When I developed the Napoleonic Code, creating a legal system that would influence dozens of nations for centuries, I did not treat this as a casual project. I devoted myself to it. I consulted experts. I debated principles. I considered implications. I reviewed drafts personally despite the countless other demands on my time as emperor. This level of commitment This obsession with getting it right created something of lasting significance. Your goals deserve this same devotion, this same willingness to go beyond reasonable interest into the realm of total commitment, into what others will call obsession, but history will recognize as the necessary intensity of the exceptional. The ordinary person asks, how can I fit this goal into my balanced life? The extraordinary person asks, how can I rearrange my life around this goal? When I prepared for battle, I often went without sleep. I studied maps until my eyes burned. I calculated supply needs until the numbers danced in my mind. I considered every contingency until possibilities multiplied like stars in the night sky. This was not balanced. This was not moderate. This was obsession in service of victory. Your ambitions require this same intensity, this same willingness to sacrifice lesser concerns for greater achievement, this same readiness to become, for a time, wonderfully imbalanced in pursuit of what matters most. But understand this: true obsession is not mindless fixation. It is not scattered franticness. It is directed intensity, focused fire, concentrated energy applied with precision. When I administered the affairs of France, I did not allow my obsession with governance to scatter my attention across every minor detail of the empire. I focused on what mattered most. I delegated the rest. I remained obsessed with the mission while being strategic about my personal involvement. Your commitment must have this same quality. Be obsessed with the goal, not with busyness. Be consumed by the vision, not by every minor task associated with it. The world will try to shame your obsession, to pathologize your commitment, to label your intensity as dysfunction. This is the defense mechanism of the mediocre, the immune response of the ordinary against the example of the extraordinary. When I drove my armies to unprecedented achievements, there were those who called me heartless. When I worked tirelessly to reform France, there were those who called me inhuman. When I dedicated myself completely to my imperial vision, there were those who called me unbalanced. History does not remember their criticisms. It remembers what my obsession built. Your commitment will face the same resistance, the same attempts to shame your intensity, the same efforts to drag you back to the comfortable mediocrity of balance. Resist, persist, embrace the fuel that obsession provides. The ordinary mind believes passion should be managed, contained, moderated. The extraordinary mind understands that passion should be unleashed, channeled, amplified. When I studied the campaigns of Alexander the Great, of Julius Caesar, of Frederick the Great, I did not do so with casual interest. I consumed their strategies. I internalized their thinking. I dreamed their battles. I became obsessed with extracting every lesson, every insight, every advantage from their examples. This obsession became the foundation of my own military genius. Your vision deserves this same quality of attention, this same depth of commitment, this same intensity that others will call excessive, and you will recognize as merely necessary. Understand this: the greatest achievements in human history were not the product of balanced lives. They were the result of magnificent obsessions, of a single-minded focus that compressed all available energy into one powerful beam. When I returned from Elba to reclaim power, I did not approach this as one project among many. I was consumed by it. Every thought, every calculation, every conversation served this singular purpose. This total commitment, this obsession, turned what seemed impossible into reality in a matter of weeks. Your goals demand this same focused intensity, this same willingness to temporarily set aside lesser concerns for the achievement of greater ones. The diluted mind accomplishes little. The concentrated mind accomplishes what others consider impossible. I did not build an empire through divided attention. I did not reshape Europe through scattered focus. I channeled all available energy into what mattered most at each phase of my ascent. Your journey requires this same strategic obsession, this same willingness to become temporarily imbalanced in service of your greater vision. But let me be clear. This is not mindless workaholism. This is not rudderless busyness. This is directed passion, channeled obsession, focused intensity applied to specific objectives at specific times. The ordinary person fears becoming obsessed. The extraordinary person fears never finding something worthy of obsession. What deserves your obsession? What goal, what vision, what ambition is worthy of this level of commitment? Find it. Focus on it. Feed it with your full attention. The world. We'll call it obsession. History will call it greatness. And you will call it the necessary fuel for a life of extraordinary achievement. You do not run out of time. You waste it. Time is neither your enemy nor your friend. It is simply a battlefield. And like any battlefield, it must be dominated, not merely occupied. I, Napoleon, did not conquer Europe by squandering hours. I did not reshape history by respecting the conventional pace of achievement. I bent time to my will. I compressed decades of advancement into years, years into months, months into days. Here's what most people don't understand. Time is not a fixed resource. It is a variable that bends to intensity, to focus, to strategic compression. The same hour that produces nothing in the hands of the mediocre becomes a crucible of achievement in the hands of the exceptional. When I moved my armies, I did so with a speed that confounded my enemies. They operated on the traditional timeline of warfare. I operated on Napoleon time. While they deliberated for weeks, I decided in hours. While they marched by conventional standards, I forced my men to cover distances that military wisdom declared impossible. The result? I arrived where they did not expect me, when they did not expect me. I seized victories before they even realized the battle had begun. This same principle applies to your ambitions, your goals, your conquests. But let me ask you this. Are you the master of your time or its servant? Do you bend hours to your will, or do you conform to their conventional boundaries? Do you attack time with strategic intent, or do you merely let it pass through your fingers? The ordinary person adapts to time. The extraordinary person makes time adapt to them. When I was a young officer, I did not study military strategy according to comfortable schedules. I did not learn languages at a casual pace. I did not absorb history in digestible increments. I devoured knowledge with an intensity that compressed years of learning into months. This mastery of time became my advantage. This dominance of hours became my edge. Your vision requires this same command of time, this same refusal to accept conventional timelines, this same intensity that bends hours to your will, rather than bending your will to hours. Understand this. There is clock time and there is achievement time. They are not the same. Clock time moves at a fixed pace. Achievement time is a function of intensity, of focus, of strategic compression. When I reformed the French government, creating order from revolutionary chaos, I did not operate on the timeline that political wisdom declared necessary. I compressed processes that should have taken decades into years. I implemented changes that should have required generations within months. This dominance of time is what separated me from merely competent administrators. This refusal to accept conventional timelines is what enabled extraordinary achievement. Yori. Goals demand the same mastery of time, this same strategic compression of achievement, this same rejection of how long things take. The ordinary mind asks, how long does this normally take? The extraordinary mind asks, how quickly can I make this happen? When I fought the Battle of Austerlitz, time itself became a weapon in my arsenal. I understood when to delay, when to accelerate, when to compress events into a decisive moment. I forced my enemies to fight on my timeline, not theirs. I dictated the pace of events rather than responding to them. This is how you must approach your own battles. Master time. Dominate it. Bend it to serve your objectives rather than allowing it to dictate your progress. But this mastery has requirements. It demands clarity of objective. It requires elimination of the unnecessary. It insists upon intensity of focus. When I planned, Campaigns, I did not waste hours on irrelevant details or pointless deliberations. I identified what mattered most. I focused my time there. I delegated or eliminated everything else. I compressed achievement through ruthless prioritization. Your vision demands this same discipline, this same clarity about what deserves your hours and what does not, this same willingness to eliminate everything that dilutes your time rather than concentrates it. The great thief of achievement is not lack of time. It is misused time, scattered time, unfocused time. When I governed France, I did not allow meetings to ramble. I did not permit discussions to wander. I did not tolerate processes that took longer than necessary. I compressed governance through intensity, through focus, through elimination of the unnecessary. Your ambitions require this same compression, this same intolerance for wasted motion, for diluted effort, for scattered focus. Understand this. Most people think in terms of the time available. The extraordinary think in terms of the time required. They do not expand work to fill available hours. They compress work to require minimum hours. When I developed the Napoleonic Code, creating a legal system that still influences dozens of nations, I did not allow the process to expand to fill all available time. I set deadlines that legal experts declared impossible. I demanded results at a pace that conventional wisdom called unreasonable. The result? A legal masterpiece created in a fraction of the time such achievements normally require. Your goals deserve the same intensity, this same compression, this same refusal to accept that greatness must operate on conventional timelines. The ordinary person thinks in terms of years. The extraordinary person thinks in terms of moments, moments seized, moments leveraged, moments compressed into achievement. When I returned from Elba to reclaim power, I did not accept the timeline that political reality seemed to dictate. I compressed what should have been months or years of maneuvering into weeks. I moved with such speed, such decisiveness, such disregard for conventional pacing that my enemies could not adjust their thinking quickly enough to mount effective resistance. Your vision requires this same command of time, this same strategic acceleration, this same unwillingness to operate at the pace that mediocrity considers reasonable. But mastering time is not merely about speed, it is about timing, about knowing when to wait and when to strike, about understanding the decisive moment and seizing it without hesitation. When I faced the combined armies of Austria and Russia at Austerlitz, I did not rush prematurely into battle. I waited, I positioned, I prepared. Then, at the precise moment of maximum advantage, I attacked with overwhelming force. I compressed the decisive action into the narrow window of greatest opportunity. This is how you must think about your own campaigns. Master not just the speed of execution, but the timing of action. Understand when patience serves your objective, and when delay becomes the enemy of achievement. The amateur confuses busyness with progress. The master distinguishes between motion and advancement. I did not build an empire through frantic activity. I built it through strategic intensity, through focused effort applied at decisive points, through dominance of time rather than consumption by it. Your ambitions demand this same distinction, this same understanding that commanding time is not about perpetual motion, but about concentrated impact. Understand this final truth. Time will either be your greatest ally or your most devastating opponent. There is no neutral relationship with it. You either master it or are mastered by it. You either bend it to your will or are bent by its passage. I chose mastery. I chose dominance. I chose to make time serve my imperial vision rather than allowing my vision to be constrained by time's conventional boundaries. Your destiny awaits the same choice. Not to accept time as it presents itself, but to reshape it, to compress it, to make it bow before your will rather than forcing your will to bow before it. This is the path of the conqueror. This is the way of the extraordinary. This is how the impossible becomes merely the difficult, and the difficult becomes merely the done. dominate time, or be defeated by it. The choice is yours. The greatest leaders never stop being students. I, Napoleon, did not rise from obscurity to emperor by assuming I knew everything. I rose by ensuring I learned everything that victory required. Here's what most people don't understand. Leadership without learning becomes obsolete. Power without growth becomes vulnerable. Authority without expanding knowledge becomes brittle. The truly powerful are not those who know the most at the beginning. They are those who learn the most along the way. When I was a young officer, I did not merely study military tactics as they existed. I questioned them. I improved them. I revolutionized them. I did not stop learning when I started leading. I accelerated my learning precisely because I was leading. This is the mindset of the conqueror. Leadership is not the end of education. It is the beginning of a more demanding, more consequential form of education. But let me ask you this. Have you stopped learning because you've started achieving? Have you allowed your current knowledge to become the ceiling of your potential rather than the floor? Do you lead from what you already know, or do you lead from what you're committed to discovering? The stagnant mind says, I have learned enough to lead. The imperial mind says, I must learn even more because I lead. When I reorganized the French military, creating the corps system that revolutionized warfare, I did not implement what I had been taught. I implemented what I had learned through observation, through experience, through constant questioning of established wisdom. This commitment to learning while leading, to growing while governing, this is what separated me from merely competent commanders. This is what transformed me from a good general into a great one. Your ambitions, your goals, your vision, they all require the same commitment to continuous learning, to persistent growth, to refusing the comfortable plateau of enough knowledge. Understand this, the knowledge that got you here will not get you there. The understanding that brought you to this point will not carry you to the next. Leadership demands not just applying what you know, but expanding what you know. When I governed France, I did not rely solely on my existing understanding of administration, of economics, of law. I consulted experts. I debated principles. I absorbed new information. I synthesized diverse perspectives. I created knowledge even as I applied knowledge. This is how you must approach your own leadership, your own advancement, your own conquest of new territories, both literal and figurative. The amateur stops learning when they start succeeding. The master accelerates learning precisely because they are succeeding. When I developed the Napoleonic Code, I did not merely impose my existing understanding of legal principles. I engaged with legal scholars. I studied diverse systems. I debated foundational concepts. I learned even as I led the creation of something that would endure for centuries. This is the paradox of true leadership. The more responsibility you have, the more, not less, you must commit to growth. The higher you rise, the more, not less, you must expand your knowledge. Your vision demands this same paradoxical commitment, this same refusal to believe that leadership exempts you from learning, this same understanding that authority increases rather than decreases your obligation to grow. But learning while leading requires specific habits, specific disciplines, specific commitments that the ordinary never make. First, you must remain genuinely curious. Power tends to create certainty. Authority tends to foster arrogance. Both kill curiosity. Both strangle growth. When I studied the cultures, the customs, the histories of the lands I conquered, I did so with genuine curiosity. Not merely to exploit this knowledge for control, but to understand, to appreciate, to learn what these different perspectives could teach me. Even as emperor, I remained a student of human nature, of governance, of strategy, of history. This curiosity, this refusal to assume I had reached the summit of necessary knowledge, this kept my thinking fresh, my strategies innovative, my leadership effective. Your advancement requires this same committed curiosity, this same refusal to believe you have arrived at complete understanding. This same openness to perspectives that might challenge your existing knowledge. Second, you must create systems of learning. Knowledge does not simply appear. It must be sought, organized, integrated, applied. When I established the educational reforms that still influence France today, I did not do so merely for others. I created systems of learning for myself as well. I surrounded myself with minds that could challenge me, inform me, expand my thinking. Your leadership demands this same systematic approach to growth, this same intentional creation of learning structures, this same surrounding of yourself with sources of knowledge that can expand your understanding. The ordinary leader uses power to insulate themselves from challenging information. The extraordinary leader uses power to access even more diverse, more challenging, more expansive sources of knowledge. Third, you must learn from failure as rigorously as you learn from success. Perhaps more so, when my Egyptian campaign failed to achieve its objectives, I did not ignore this reality. I did not excuse it. I studied it. I extracted lessons from it. I applied those lessons to future campaigns, even my catastrophic defeat in Russia, while devastating to my empire, provided lessons that I applied to subsequent military operations. The great leader does not waste failure. They mine it for insight. They extract wisdom from disaster. Your journey will include failures, setbacks, defeats both minor and significant. The question is not whether these will occur. The question is whether you will learn from them or merely experience them. The ordinary mind seeks to forget failure. The extraordinary mind insists on extracting its lessons. Fourth, you must apply what you learn immediately. Knowledge unapplied is merely theoretical. Wisdom unused is merely philosophical. When I studied the campaigns of Alexander the Great, of Julius Caesar, of Frederick the Great, I did not do so as an academic exercise. I extracted principles, strategies, tactics that I applied directly to my own military operations. This immediate application, this bridge between learning and doing, this is what transforms knowledge from abstract to practical, from interesting to powerful. Your growth must have this same quality, this same insistence on application, this same refusal to allow learning to remain theoretical rather than practical. Finally, you must teach what you learn. Teaching deepens understanding. It clarifies thinking. It reveals gaps in knowledge. When I trained my officers, when I explained my strategies, when I articulated my vision for France, I was not merely instructing others. I was refining my own understanding. I was testing the clarity of my own thinking. I was discovering where my own knowledge needed expansion. Your leadership requires this same commitment to teaching, this same willingness to articulate what you know, both to benefit others and to deepen your own mastery. Remember this: the greatest leaders are not those who know the most. They are those who learn the most. They are those who refuse to allow their current understanding to define the boundaries of their potential impact. I did not reshape Europe by relying solely on what I knew at the beginning of my rise. I reshaped it by committing to learn everything victory required along the way, by refusing to allow my knowledge to stagnate even as my power grew. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the conqueror. This is how empires, both literal and metaphorical, are built. Learn while you lead, grow while you govern, expand while you execute. This is how greatness sustains itself. This is how victory becomes not a momentary achievement, but an enduring reality. Most people scatter. The few who win focus. In a world engineered for distraction, the ability to maintain ruthless focus is not merely an advantage. It is the advantage. I, Napoleon, did not conquer Europe by dividing my attention. I did not reshape history by scattering my forces. I concentrated my power. I focused my resources. I directed my energy with laser precision at the decisive point. Here's what most people don't understand. The mind that touches everything accomplishes nothing. The force that spreads everywhere conquers nowhere. Power lies not in expansion, but in concentration. When I fought battles, I did not distribute my forces evenly across the field. I identified the decisive point, the place where victory could be achieved most efficiently, and I concentrated overwhelming force there. This principle of concentration, of ruthless focus on what matters most, won me victories against superior numbers time after time. This same principle applies to your ambitions, your goals, your conquests. But let me ask you this: how focused are you truly? How ruthlessly do you concentrate your resources, your time, your energy, your attention on what matters most? Or are you like most people, scattering your power across 1,000 minor engagements, 100 trivial distractions, dozens of inconsequential battles? The ordinary mind says, I must attend to everything. The imperial mind says, I must identify what matters most and focus there with ruthless precision. When I reformed the French government, creating order from revolutionary chaos, I did not attempt to personally oversee every detail, manage every department, supervise every process. I identified the critical points, the areas where my direct involvement would yield the greatest impact, and I focused my attention there. I delegated or ignored the rest, this ruthless prioritization, this refusal to be distracted by the non-essential. This is what separated me from merely competent administrators. This is what allowed me to accomplish in years what would have taken others decades. Your vision demands this same quality of focus, this same ruthless prioritization, this same clarity about what deserves your attention and what does not. Understand this: your focus determines your reality. What you consistently concentrate on expands. What you consistently ignore contracts. The direction of your attention is the direction of your life. When I planned campaigns, I did not allow myself to be distracted by political intrigues, by social obligations, by the 1,000 competing demands that constantly sought my attention. I created periods of intense, uninterrupted focus where I could think deeply, strategize effectively, plan comprehensively. This ability to isolate my mind from distraction, to create mental environments of pure concentration, this was perhaps my greatest tactical advantage. Your ambitions require this same capacity, this same ability to shut out the noise, to silence the distractions, to create spaces of pure focus where your mind can work at its highest level. The amateur tries to focus while allowing interruptions. The master creates conditions where interruptions cannot exist. When I studied military history, analyzing the Etbu, campaigns of history's greatest generals, I did not do so casually with divided attention. I immersed myself completely. I visualized their battles. I contemplated their decisions. I absorbed their strategies with complete concentration. This quality of attention, this depth of focus, allowed me to extract insights that others missed, to see patterns that others overlooked, to develop understanding that others could not achieve. Your growth demands this same quality of attention, this same depth of engagement, this same refusal to learn superficially with scattered focus. But in today's world, maintaining this kind of concentration requires more than mere decision. It requires strategy. It demands systems. It needs protection. When I isolated myself to work on matters of state, my guards had clear instructions. No interruptions except under specific, critical circumstances. I created physical boundaries that protected my mental focus. I established protocols that preserved my concentration. Your focus requires this same protection, this same creation of boundaries, both physical and digital, this same establishment of protocols that shield your attention from the constant assault of the trivial. Understand this: in the modern world, your attention is under constant attack. Every app, every notification, every headline is designed to hijack your focus, to pull you away from what matters most to you and toward what matters most to those who profit from your distraction. This is not merely annoying, it is an existential threat to your ambitions, a direct attack on your potential for greatness. When I governed France, I did not allow every minor crisis, every passing concern, every temporary disruption to dictate my focus. I distinguished between the urgent and the important. I reserved my deepest attention for matters of genuine consequence, not merely matters of immediate noise. Your vision demands this same discrimination, this same ability to distinguish between the merely loud and the truly significant, this same commitment to reserve your best focus for what advances your most important objectives. The scattered mind reacts to the loudest stimulus. The focused mind responds to the most important one. When I developed military strategies that revolutionized warfare, I did not do so while dividing my attention across a dozen different projects. I created periods of intense, sustained focus on this single objective. I thought deeply. I considered thoroughly. I planned comprehensively. This quality of undivided attention, this willingness to focus completely on one significant matter, rather than partially on many trivial ones, this produced insights that changed the course of history. Your most important work requires this same quality of attention, this same willingness to focus completely rather than divide constantly, this same understanding that depth produces what breadth cannot. But ruthless focus is not merely about eliminating external distractions. It is about conquering internal ones as well. When I fought battles, I did not allow fear, doubt, or uncertainty to divide my mental resources. I maintained complete concentration on the objective, on the strategy, on the execution. I refused to waste mental energy on unproductive emotions, on speculative anxieties, on distracting internal dialogues. This mental discipline, this ability to focus not just my external activities, but my internal resources, this was perhaps my greatest command advantage. Your achievements demand this same discipline, this same ability to focus not just your actions, but your thoughts. This same refusal to waste mental energy on unproductive emotions, on speculative anxieties, on distracting internal narratives. The amateur allows their mind to wander wherever emotions lead. The master directs their mind precisely where objectives demand on. When I returned from Elba to reclaim power, I did not divide my focus across multiple possible strategies. I identified the most direct path to Paris and concentrated all my resources, physical, mental, emotional, on that single objective. This clarity of focus, this refusal to be distracted by alternative approaches, this enabled me to accomplish in weeks what should have taken months or years. Your vision requires this same singularity of focus, this same clarity about the critical path, this same willingness to eliminate not just what is obviously irrelevant, but what is merely less relevant. Understand this final truth. Focus is not merely a tactic. It is a way of being. It is not something you do occasionally. It is something you become completely. I did not achieve greatness by focusing sometimes, when convenient, when easy. I achieved greatness by making focus a fundamental element of my character, my mindset, my identity. The scattered person tries to focus. The focused person is focus. Your ambitions demand this same transformation, this same evolution from trying to focus to being focused. This same development from occasional concentration to fundamental identity. In a world designed to scatter your attention, the ability to maintain ruthless focus is not merely helpful. It is essential, not merely beneficial. It is decisive. This is the way of the conqueror. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is how empires, both literal and metaphorical, are built. Focus ruthlessly. Concentrate power. Direct energy with precision. Respect is never requested. It is commanded. Authority is never granted. It is taken. I, Napoleon, did not rise from obscurity to emperor by asking for recognition. I did not become the master of Europe by seeking approval. I commanded respect through action, through presence, through the force of an unshakable self-belief that made others believe as well. Here's what most people don't understand. Respect is not a verbal transaction. It is not given because you request it. It flows naturally toward those who embody certain qualities, certain behaviors, certain ways of being that trigger instinctive recognition in others. When I first took command of the Army of Italy, the generals under my authority were skeptical. I was young, just 26. I lacked aristocratic heritage. I spoke with a Corsican accent they mocked behind my back. By conventional standards, I did not deserve their respect. I did not argue with this assessment. I did not plead for their recognition. I simply acted with such decisive competence, such unwavering certainty, such strategic brilliance that their respect became inevitable. Not because I demanded it, but because I commanded it. This is how true authority works. It does not beg. It does not persuade. It simply is. But let me ask you this. Do you find yourself seeking respect rather than commanding it? Do you request recognition rather than requiring it? Do you explain your authority rather than embodying it? The ordinary person asks for respect. The extraordinary person creates conditions where respect is the only possible response. When I walked into a room, whether a war council, a diplomatic negotiation, or a state function, I did not hope for deference. I expected it, not from ego, not from entitlement, but from the absolute certainty that I had earned it through achievement, through competence, through the consistent demonstration of exceptional capability. This expectation, this unspoken but unmistakable assumption of authority, created a gravitational field that pulled others into my orbit. It established the terms of engagement before a word was spoken. Your presence must have this same quality, this same unstated but undeniable expectation, this same gravitational pull that arranges the social universe around you rather than forcing you to find your place within it. Understand this. People respond not primarily to what you say, but to what you embody. Not to your claims, but to your presence. Not to your requests, but to your being. When I needed to inspire troops before battle, I did not rely on flowery speeches alone. I relied on the power of my presence. I moved among the men. I looked them in the eye. I demonstrated absolute certainty in our victory. I showed no doubt, no fear, no hesitation. This embodied confidence, this physical manifestation of unshakable belief, this generated respect that no words alone could have created. Your leadership requires this same quality of presence, this same physical embodiment of certainty, this same visible, tangible demonstration of absolute conviction. The amateur commands with words. The master commands with presence. When I crowned myself emperor, I did not ask France if I deserved this title. I did not seek validation for this unprecedented act. I simply took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on my own head. This physical action, this visible claiming of authority rather than requesting it, this established my imperial status more powerfully than any verbal declaration could have. Your authority must have this same quality of embodied confidence, this same willingness to claim rather than request, this same understanding that actions establish status more powerfully than words. But commanding respect without asking requires specific qualities, specific behaviors, specific ways of being that the ordinary never develop and the extraordinary cultivate religiously. First, you must master competence, not merely adequacy, not simply sufficiency, mastery. When I reorganized the French military, creating the corps system that revolutionized warfare, I did not do so based on theory alone. I did so based on deep experience, on comprehensive knowledge, on demonstrated expertise. My authority flowed from this visible competence. Your respect must be built on this same foundation, this same commitment to mastery rather than mediocrity, this same visible demonstration of exceptional capability. Second, you must maintain absolute composure, especially under pressure. Nothing diminishes respect more quickly than visible emotional reactivity. Nothing commands respect more powerfully than calm in chaos. When my forces faced crisis in battle, when strategies needed adaptation, when unexpected challenges emerged, I did not panic. I did not rage. I did not show anxiety. I remained calm, composed, controlled. This steady presence amid chaos inspired confidence in my leadership more than any speech could have. Your authority requires this same quality of composure, this same ability to remain centered when others are scattered, this same calm assurance that steadies those around you rather than adding to their uncertainty. Third, you must demonstrate decisive action. Hesitation erodes respect. Decision commands it. When I saw the strategic opportunity at Austerlitz, I did not delay. I did not second guess. I did not seek consensus. I decided. I acted. I moved with such certainty that others were compelled to follow, not because they were ordered to, but because my decisiveness created its own gravitational pull. Your leadership must have this same quality of decision, the same willingness to act when others hesitate, this same understanding that decisiveness itself creates momentum that carries others forward with you. Fourth, you must speak with economy and precision. The respect seeker talks too much. The respect commander says exactly enough. When I gave orders, I did not explain excessively. I did not justify repeatedly. I did not qualify unnecessarily. I spoke with clarity, with brevity, with precision. This economy of expression, this refusal to dilute direction with explanation, this communicated an authority that verbose instruction never could. Your communication must have this same quality, this same economy of expression, this same understanding. That excessive explanation undermines rather than enhances authority. Fifth, you must hold unwavering standards beginning with yourself. When I led armies, I did not expect from my soldiers what I did not demand from myself. I shared their hardships. I demonstrated the discipline I required. I embodied the standards I enforced. This congruence between expectation and example, this visible integrity of demand, this generated respect that no mere position could have commanded. Your authority must have this same foundation, this same congruence between what you expect and what you exemplify. This same visible demonstration that you hold yourself to standards even higher than those you require of others. Finally, you must focus attention outward, not inward. Those who command respect think about the mission, not about being respected. When I led France, my focus was not on how others perceived me. My focus was on what France needed to become. This outward orientation, this commitment to purpose beyond self, this paradoxically generated the very respect that self-focus would have destroyed. Your leadership requires this same orientation, this same commitment to mission beyond ego. This same understanding that respect flows most naturally to those least concerned with receiving it. Remember this: true authority is not imposed. It is recognized. It emerges not from demand, but from demonstration, not from position, but from presence. I did not become emperor by claiming the title. I became emperor by embodying imperial qualities so completely that the title simply acknowledged what was already evident. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the conqueror. This is how respect is commanded without ever being requested. Embody excellence, demonstrate mastery, maintain composure, act decisively, speak economically, hold standards, focus outward. Do these things consistently, and respect will flow toward you as naturally as water flows downhill. You will be knocked down. This is certain. The only question is whether you will rise again. I, Napoleon, did not build an empire without setbacks. I did not reshape Europe without defeats. I experienced catastrophic failures that would have ended the ambitions of lesser men, but I rose. Again and again, I transformed defeat from an ending into education, from conclusion into continuation. Here's what most people don't understand. Resilience is not an inborn trait. It is a cultivated skill. It is not a gift granted to the fortunate few. It is a capacity developed through deliberate response to adversity. The truly powerful are not those who never fall. They are those who fall and rise with even greater determination. When my Egyptian campaign failed to achieve its objectives, when the British destroyed my fleet at the Battle of the Nile, conventional wisdom declared Napoleon finished. My army was stranded, my reputation was damaged, my career appeared over. Yet, from this seemingly catastrophic setback, I extracted lessons. I preserved my core force, I managed a strategic return to France, and within months I had seized political power. This transformation of defeat into eventual triumph, this is the essence of resilience. But let me ask you this: how do you respond to failure, to setback, to defeat? Do you collapse? Do you surrender? Do you allow temporary defeat to become permanent definition? Or do you rise with the imperial understanding that defeat is merely education in disguise? The ordinary mind sees failure as the end. The extraordinary mind sees it as a necessary step. When I was exiled to Elba after my first abdication, the world believed Napoleon was finished. My enemies relaxed. My allies abandoned me. My story was considered complete. Yet, within 10 months, I had escaped, returned to France, rallied an army, and reclaimed power without firing a shot. This comeback, perhaps the most remarkable in political history, was possible only because I refused to accept defeat as final. This is the mindset you must develop. This is the perspective that transforms catastrophe into merely a chapter rather than the conclusion. Understand this: resilience is not optimism. It is not positive thinking. It is not denial of reality. It is the capacity to face harsh truth without surrender, to acknowledge defeat without accepting its permanence, to extract value from disaster. When my Russian campaign ended in catastrophe, with hundreds of thousands of my soldiers dead, my Grande Armée destroyed, my aura of invincibility shattered, I did not deny this reality. I did not pretend it was other than what it was, the greatest military disaster of my career, but neither did I surrender to its seemingly inevitable conclusion. I returned to Paris. I raised new armies. I reorganized my forces. I developed new strategies. Within months of what should have been a career-ending defeat, I was again leading forces into battle. This is resilience in its purest form. Not the absence of defeat, but the refusal to be defined by it. Your journey will include failures, setbacks, defeats both minor and significant. The question is not whether these will occur. The question is whether you will use them or be used by them. The amateur sees defeat as punishment. The master sees it as education. When I lost the Battle of Leipzig, the largest battle in Europe before World War I, it was a devastating blow. My forces were pushed back. My German allies abandoned me. My empire began to crumble. Yet even from this catastrophic defeat, I extracted lessons. I identified tactical errors. I recognized strategic mistakes. I learned principles that I applied to subsequent campaigns. This is how you must approach your own defeats, not as final judgments, but as fertile grounds for growth. Not as punishments, but as particularly valuable forms of education. But building resilience requires specific mental disciplines, specific emotional capacities, specific practices that the ordinary never develop and the extraordinary cultivate religiously. First, you must maintain perspective. Defeat is never as catastrophic as it first appears, just as victory is never as complete as it initially seems. When I suffered military setbacks, I did not allow them to expand in my mind to dimensions beyond their actual significance. I placed them in context. I recognized that a lost battle was not a lost war, that a failed campaign was not a failed cause. This perspective, this refusal to catastrophize defeat, this preserved the mental space needed for recovery. Your resilience requires this same discipline, this same ability to contain defeat within its actual dimensions rather than allowing it to expand through emotional magnification. Second, you must extract lessons immediately. Defeat unused is merely suffering. Defeat analyzed is education. When my forces were defeated at Aspern-Essling in 1809, my first major battlefield defeat. In over a decade, I did not waste time in regret or recrimination. I studied what went wrong. I identified specific errors. I developed specific corrections. And 6 weeks later, I won the decisive Battle of Wagram on the same ground. This immediate extraction of value, this refusal to experience defeat without analyzing it, this transformed setback from merely painful to productive. Your response to failure must have this same quality, this same insistence on extraction of value, this same refusal to experience defeat without analyzing its lessons. Third, you must maintain identity beyond outcome. If you are defined solely by results, defeat becomes existential rather than situational. When I experienced political and military setbacks, I did not allow them to destroy my self-conception. I did not permit temporary failure to erase the larger truth of who I was and what I was capable of achieving. This separation of identity from outcome, this refusal to be defined by current results, this preserved the psychological foundation for comeback. Your resilience demands this same separation, this same understanding that who you are transcends what has happened to you, this same refusal to allow temporary defeat to become permanent identity. Fourth, you must act quickly after defeat. Lingering in failure prolongs its power. Immediate action breaks its spell. When my forces were pushed back from Moscow, suffering catastrophic losses during the retreat, I did not pause to lick my wounds. I did not take time to recover emotionally. I immediately began raising new armies, reorganizing forces, developing new strategies. This rapid action, this refusal to dwell in defeat, this prevented temporary setback from hardening into permanent reality. Your resilience requires this same commitment to immediate action, this same refusal to linger in failure, this same understanding that movement itself breaks the gravitational pull of defeat. Finally, you must use defeat to fuel determination rather than feed despair. The energy of setback can either crush you or propel you. The choice is yours. When I was finally defeated at Waterloo, when I was exiled to St. Helena with no hope of return, I did not surrender my dignity, my self-conception, my place in history. Even in final defeat, I maintained the imperial mind that transformed exile into opportunity to shape my legacy through memoirs that would influence military and political thinking for centuries. This transmutation of defeat's energy, this alchemical conversion of setback into fuel, this is perhaps the highest expression of resilience. Your response to failure must have this same quality. This same ability to harness defeat's emotional energy for advancement, rather than allowing it to consume you in despair. Remember this: history does not remember those who never failed. It remembers those who refused to be defined by failure. Those who rose from defeat with wisdom earned in the falling. I did not build an empire by avoiding setbacks. I built it by rising from them, by using them, by refusing to grant them power beyond their temporary physical reality. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the conqueror. This is how seeming disaster becomes merely delay and apparent ending becomes merely education. Resilience is built in defeat. Now build yours. Empires are built with allies, not applause. The greatest achievements in history were not solo performances. They were symphonies of coordinated effort, of aligned ambition, of mutual commitment to a shared vision. I, Napoleon, did not conquer Europe alone. I did not govern France single-handedly. I built systems of loyalty. I created structures of commitment. I forged bonds of mutual interest that turned individual soldiers into the Grande Armée, separate administrators into a unified government, disconnected provinces into a cohesive empire. Here's what most people don't understand. Loyalty is not an entitlement. It is not granted by position. It is not guaranteed by title. It is earned through specific actions, specific qualities, specific demonstrations that the extraordinary understand and the ordinary ignore. When I took command of the Army of Italy in 1796, the soldiers were demoralized, underfed, poorly equipped. Many openly questioned why they should follow this young, unproven general with the strange accent. I did not demand their loyalty because of my rank. I earned it through immediate action to improve their conditions, through strategies that brought them victory, through my willingness to share their hardships on the march and their dangers in battle. Within weeks, these skeptical troops were fighting with unprecedented dedication. Within months, they would have followed me anywhere. Not because I expected their loyalty, but because I earned it. But let me ask you this. Do you expect loyalty, or do you earn it? Do you believe commitment should come with your title, or do you understand it must be cultivated through specifics, actions? Do you assume others should follow you, or do you create conditions where following you serves their interests as well as yours? The ordinary leader says, "I am in charge, therefore you owe me loyalty." The extraordinary leader says, "I must earn your loyalty daily through my actions, my decisions, my character." When I created the Legion of Honor, establishing France's highest order of merit, I did not base it on birth or wealth or political connection. I based it on achievement, on service, on demonstrated excellence. I created a system where loyalty was exchanged for recognition, where commitment was rewarded with honor. This reciprocity, this mutual exchange of value, this is the foundation of all sustainable loyalty. Your vision, your goals, your ambitions, they all require this same understanding, this same recognition that loyalty must be cultivated, not commanded. That commitment must be earned, not expected. Understand this. People are loyal to what serves them, to what advances their interests, to what aligns with their values, to what offers them identity, purpose, recognition, advancement. Create these. Conditions and loyalty follows naturally. Fail to create them, and no amount of demand, no level of authority, no degree of pressure will generate genuine commitment. When I built my government, I did not staff it exclusively with those who agreed with me politically. I selected the most competent individuals regardless of their prior affiliations. I chose ability over ideology, talent over conformity, excellence over obedience. This commitment to merit above all else, this willingness to value competence over convenience, this generated a loyalty based on respect rather than requirement. These officials served with dedication, not because they feared me, but because they respected a system that recognized their excellence. Your leadership requires this same foundation, this same commitment to merit above all else, this same understanding that genuine loyalty grows from genuine respect. The amateur demands loyalty through position. The master earns it through principle. When I created the Napoleonic Code, establishing a legal system that still forms the basis of law in dozens of nations today, I did not design it to serve my interests alone. I created a system of genuine justice, of rational principles, of clear rights and responsibilities. The people of France, and eventually much of Europe, became loyal to this system not because it bore my name, but because it served their needs for fairness, for predictability, for protection under law. This is the deepest source of sustainable loyalty, creating systems, structures, and conditions that genuinely serve those whose commitment you seek. Your vision must have this same quality, this same service beyond self-interest. This same creation of value that generates loyalty as a natural response rather than a reluctant concession. But earning loyalty requires specific actions, specific qualities, specific demonstrations that the ordinary never make, and the extraordinary provide consistently. First, you must deliver tangible results. Nothing generates loyalty like success shared. When I led armies to victory, when I secured favorable peace terms, when I brought order to chaos and prosperity to poverty, I created concrete conditions that benefited those who followed me. Their loyalty was not to me as a person, but to the results I consistently delivered. Your leadership must have this same foundation, this same delivery of tangible achievements, this same understanding that loyalty follows results more naturally than it follows rhetoric. Second, you must demonstrate loyalty before you expect to receive it. Loyalty given precedes loyalty gained. When I stood with my troops in battle, when I shared their hardships on the march, when I risked what they risked and endured what they endured, I demonstrated a loyalty to them that naturally generated their loyalty to me. This reciprocity, this mutual commitment, this created bonds stronger than any official authority could command. Your leadership requires this same demonstration, the same visible commitment to those whose loyalty you seek, the same understanding that loyalty flows toward those who first extend it. Third, you must create systems of recognition and advancement. Loyalty flourishes where contribution is acknowledged and rewarded. When I established the meritocratic systems that transformed French society, replacing birth privilege with demonstrated excellence as the path to advancement, I created conditions where loyalty became rational self-interest. People committed to a system that recognized their contributions, that rewarded their excellence, that offered them paths forward based on merit rather than connection. Your vision demands this same structure, this same creation of recognition. Systems. This same understanding that loyalty thrives where contribution is acknowledged and rewarded. Fourth, you must provide clarity of purpose, of vision, of direction. People commit to what they understand. When I articulated my vision for France, for Europe, for a new social and political order based on rational principles rather than inherited tradition, I created a clarity that enabled genuine commitment. People could see what we were building together. They could understand their role in this larger enterprise. They could commit to a vision they could comprehend. Your leadership requires this same clarity, this same articulation of purpose, this same understanding that loyalty requires a destination worthy of the journey. Fifth, you must maintain consistency between words and actions. Trust, the foundation of loyalty, grows from congruence and withers in its absence. When I promised my soldiers victory, I delivered strategies to achieve it. When I promised the French people order after revolution, I created systems to maintain it. When I promised administrators authority within their domains, I respected the boundaries I had established. This consistency, this alignment between declaration and demonstration, this built the trust from which loyalty grows. Your leadership demands this same congruence, this same alignment between what you say and what you do, this same understanding. That trust precedes loyalty, and consistency builds trust. Finally, you must create emotional connection beyond transactional advantage. The deepest loyalty comes from belonging, not merely benefiting. When I inspired my troops before battle, when I spoke to the French people about our shared destiny, when I created symbols, rituals, and identities that connected individuals to our collective enterprise, I generated a loyalty that transcended rational calculation. People committed not just to what we were doing, but to who we were becoming together. Your vision requires this same emotional dimension, this same creation of identity beyond transaction, this same understanding that the deepest loyalty comes from belonging to something larger than self. Remember this: the greatest leaders in history did not command loyalty. They earned it. They did not expect commitment. They created conditions where commitment was the natural response to the value they provided, the vision they articulated, the character they demonstrated. I did not build an empire through demanded obedience. I built it through earned commitment, through systems that served, through victories that benefited, through recognition that rewarded, through vision that inspired. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the conqueror. This is how empires, both literal and metaphorical, are built. Earn loyalty, create commitment, build a tribe that fights with you not because they must, but because they choose to. Emotion clouds execution. Passion powers it. Understanding the difference between these two forces, learning to remove disruptive emotion while maintaining productive fire, This is the secret balance that separates the merely ambitious from the truly imperial. I, Napoleon, did not conquer Europe through emotional reaction. I did not reshape history through unchecked feeling. I maintained cold clarity in decision while preserving the burning drive that pushed boundaries, that demanded excellence, that refused acceptance of the status quo. Here's what most people don't understand. The most dangerous emotions are not anger, fear, or doubt. The most dangerous emotion is any feeling that clouds judgment, that compromises clarity, that interferes with optimal decision-making. And the most valuable passion is not excitement, enthusiasm, or even love of the goal. The most valuable passion is the sustained fire that fuels persistence, that demands excellence, that refuses to settle for anything less than extraordinary achievement. When I faced crises on the battlefield, when strategies needed adjustment, when unexpected challenges emerged, when quick decisions meant the difference between victory and defeat, I did not allow emotion to contaminate my thinking. I maintained cold analytical clarity. I assessed options. I calculated probabilities. I made decisions based on rational assessment, not emotional reaction. Yet, this clarity was not emotionless. It was powered by an underlying fire, a passionate commitment to victory, a burning refusal to accept defeat, an intense drive to achieve the seemingly impossible. This balance, this paradoxical combination of cold execution and hot ambition, this is what separated me from merely competent commanders. This is what transformed me from a good general into a legend. But let me ask you this. Do your emotions serve your goals or sabotage them? Does your passion power your advance or cloud your judgment? Have you learned to maintain the fire that drives achievement while removing the emotions that compromise execution? The ordinary mind is controlled by emotion. The extraordinary mind controls emotion. When I negotiated treaties after military victories, I did not allow pride, vengeance, or other natural emotions to dictate terms. I maintained clear focus on strategic objectives. I separated the emotional satisfaction of punitive demands from the practical value of sustainable agreements. I made decisions that served France's long-term interests rather than my short-term. Emotional gratification, this emotional discipline, this ability to subordinate feeling to function, this created diplomatic outcomes that advanced my imperial vision more effectively than any emotionally satisfying but strategically unwise alternatives could have. Your ambitions, your goals, your vision, they all require this same discipline, this same subordination of emotional impulse to strategic outcome, this same clarity of execution, unclouded by the fog of feeling. Understand this. Emotion is not the enemy of achievement. Undisciplined emotion is. Passion is not the opponent of clarity. Unchecked passion is. When I developed the Napoleonic Code, creating a legal system that would influence dozens of nations for centuries, I did not approach this task with cold detachment. I brought intense passion to the project, a burning commitment to rational principles, to clear justice, to systems that would endure beyond my reign. But I did not allow this passion to compromise the clear thinking, the logical analysis, the careful consideration that such a momentous undertaking required. This balance, this fusion of fire and clarity, this produced something of lasting significance. Your vision demands this same harmony, this same integration of passion that powers and clarity that directs, this same refusal to choose between emotion and execution when the masterful approach is to harness the former while maintaining the latter. The amateur is either coldly analytical or hotly passionate. The master is both simultaneously. When I reformed the French administrative system, creating the centralized governance that brought order to post-revolutionary chaos, I maintained passionate commitment to the vision of a rationally organized state while executing the complex, detailed work with dispassionate precision. I did not allow the emotional satisfaction of immediate control to compromise the strategic benefit of delegated authority. I maintained the fire that demanded excellence while removing the emotions that would have clouded optimal design. This dual capacity, this ability to burn with passion for the objective while maintaining cool clarity in execution, this is perhaps the most difficult balance for the ambitious to achieve. Yet, it is essential for extraordinary accomplishment. Your leadership requires this same integration, this same fusion of fire and focus, this same understanding that passion powers achievement, while emotion can cloud it. But maintaining this balance requires specific mental disciplines, specific emotional capacities, specific practices that the ordinary never develop and the extraordinary cultivate religiously. First, you must develop emotional awareness. You cannot manage what you cannot recognize. When I faced difficult decisions, whether on the battlefield, in governance, or in diplomacy, I maintained acute awareness of my emotional state. I recognized when anger, pride, vengeance, or other natural feelings were arising. This awareness, this conscious recognition, this created the space needed for choice rather than reaction. Your execution demands this same awareness, this same conscious recognition of emotional states, this same creation of space between feeling and action. The amateur reacts from emotion. The master responds with awareness of emotion. Second, you must separate feeling from function. Emotion can inform decisions without dictating them. When I planned campaigns, I did not ignore the emotional dimensions of warfare, the morale of troops, the psychology of opponents, the will of civilian populations. I acknowledged these factors. I considered them, but I did not allow my own emotional reactions to determine strategic decisions. I maintained the distinction between recognizing emotion and being governed by it. Your leadership requires this same separation, this same distinction between acknowledging feeling and surrendering to it, this same understanding that emotion can be data without being director. Third, you must cultivate dispassionate analysis specifically for critical decisions. Some moments demand complete emotional neutrality. When I evaluated battlefield reports, when I assessed diplomatic intelligence, when I reviewed administrative data, I temporarily suspended emotional engagement. I created a mental state of pure, analytical focus where information could be processed without the distortion of feeling. This capacity for dispassionate analysis, this ability to see reality as it is rather than as emotion would prefer it to be, this enabled decisions based on actual conditions rather than desired ones. Your execution demands this same capacity, this same ability to create states of pure analytical clarity, this same skill in temporarily suspending emotional engagement when critical decisions must be made. But removing disruptive emotion does not mean eliminating productive passion. The fire that drives achievement must be maintained even as the feelings that cloud judgment are managed. When I inspired troops before battle, when I articulated vision for France, when I demanded excellence from administrators and generals alike, I did not do so with cold detachment. I brought passionate intensity to these communications. I transferred the fire that burned within me to those who would execute the vision alongside me, this dual capacity to remove emotion from analysis while maintaining passion in inspiration. This is the mark of the truly extraordinary leader. Your leadership requires this same duality, this same ability to shift from dispassionate analysis to passionate inspiration as the moment demands. This same understanding that different aspects of leadership require different emotional states. The amateur remains in a single emotional state regardless of the task at hand. The master shifts states to match requirements. When I suffered defeats, as all who attempt greatness eventually will, I allowed myself to feel the natural emotional response. I experienced the disappointment, the frustration, the anger that such setbacks generate. But I limited the duration of this emotional engagement. I processed the feeling, extracted its lessons, then shifted to dispassionate analysis of what went wrong and passionate commitment to what would come next. This emotional agility, this ability to experience feeling without being imprisoned by it, this enabled resilience that mere suppression of emotion never could have produced. Your journey will include setbacks. The question is not whether you will feel negative emotions, but whether you will be controlled by them. The discipline is not to eliminate such feelings, but to process them efficiently, extract their value, and move beyond their limitations. Remember this: the most dangerous territory is not high emotion or cold analysis. It is unconscious emotion masquerading as rational thought. It is feeling disguised as fact. It is reaction pretending to be response. I did not build an empire by eliminating passion. I built it by harnessing passion while managing emotion, by maintaining the fire that powers achievement, while removing the feelings that cloud execution. This is the balance of the extraordinary. This is the discipline of the imperial mind. This is how the seemingly impossible becomes merely the difficult, and the difficult becomes merely the done. Remove the emotion, keep the fire, find the balance that makes conquerors of the ambitious and emperors of the determined. There will be moments when you stand alone, when allies desert, when supporters doubt, when even those closest to you question your vision, your judgment, your very sanity. In these moments you either fold or forge destiny alone. I, Napoleon, did not reshape history by consensus. I did not build an empire through universal approval. There were critical junctures when I stood absolutely alone, when conventional wisdom aligned against me, when even trusted advisors counseled retreat from the path I knew was right. Here's what most people don't understand. The most significant achievements in human history were not produced by committee. They were not advanced by consensus. They were driven by individuals willing to stand alone with their vision when no one else could see it, with their conviction when no one else shared it, with their determination when everyone else faltered. When I executed the coup of 18 Brumaire, seizing power in France, there was a moment when the Council of 500 turned against me. They shouted for my outlawry. They physically threatened me. My own brother, presiding over the assembly, could not control the chaos. My allies wavered. My supporters hesitated. In that crucial moment, I stood alone. I did not retreat. I did not surrender to the collective opposition. I held firm to my vision even when temporary isolation was the price. The result: within hours, the tide turned. Within days, I had consolidated power. Within years, I had transformed France. Had I surrendered to the momentary desertion of support, history would have taken a different course. This willingness to stand alone when necessary, this refusal to abandon conviction merely because it is temporarily unsupported, this is what separates those who merely desire greatness from those who achieve it. But let me ask you this: are you willing to stand alone with your vision, to maintain your course when supporters desert, to advance your conviction when consensus collapses? Or do you require the constant comfort of agreement, the continuous validation of approval, the perpetual reassurance of others? The ordinary mind seeks constant confirmation. The extraordinary mind maintains conviction even in isolation. When I planned the invasion of Egypt, a bold strategic move to threaten British interests in the East, many of my advisors counseled against it. The logistical challenges were enormous. The strategic risks were significant. The political complications were substantial. Had I required consensus, had I demanded unanimous support, had I insisted on universal approval, this campaign would never have launched. Instead, I maintained my conviction despite the doubts of others. I advanced my vision despite the skepticism of many. I stood alone with my strategic judgment when necessary, this capacity to maintain course without constant validation, this willingness to advance based on inner conviction rather than external consensus. This is essential for any significant achievement. Your vision, your goals, your ambitions, they all require this same capacity, this same willingness to stand alone when necessary. This same refusal to make support a prerequisite for advance. Understand this. The truly extraordinary is, by definition, beyond ordinary understanding. The genuinely innovative is, by nature, outside existing consensus. If your vision requires universal approval before action, it will never exceed the boundaries of the conventional. When I reformed the French educational system, creating institutions and approaches that still influence education today, I did not wait for universal agreement among existing academic authorities. I did not require consensus from traditional educational leaders. I advanced my vision based on conviction, not consensus. I moved forward with reform despite significant opposition from entrenched interests. This willingness to proceed without unanimous approval, this capacity to advance based on conviction rather than consensus, this created innovations that consensus alone would never have produced. Your vision demands this same independence, this same willingness to advance without universal validation, this same understanding that significant achievement often requires temporary isolation. The amateur proceeds only with support. The master proceeds with or without it. When I implemented the continental system, an ambitious attempt to defeat Britain economically by closing European ports to British trade, many allies resisted. Many advisors doubted. Many supporters questioned. The conventional wisdom declared it impractical, unsustainable, doomed to failure. Had I required their approval to advance? Had I demanded their endorsement to proceed? Had I made their support a prerequisite for action, this bold strategy would never have been attempted. Instead, I stood alone with my conviction when necessary. I maintained course despite significant skepticism. I advanced based on my judgment even when others could not yet see what I saw. This capacity to proceed without universal validation, this willingness to stand alone with your vision when required, this is perhaps the most difficult test for those who aspire to extraordinary achievement. Your ambitions will face this same test, this same moment when supporters waver, when allies doubt, when consensus collapses. Your response in these moments of isolation will determine whether your vision advances or aborts. But standing alone effectively requires specific mental disciplines, specific emotional capacities, specific practices that the ordinary never develop, and the extraordinary cultivate religiously. First, you must distinguish between useful feedback and mere resistance to change. Not all opposition is equal. When I faced resistance to my reforms, to my strategies, to my vision, I did not dismiss all criticism as merely fear of the new. I distinguished between thoughtful concerns that could improve execution and reflexive resistance that simply feared disruption of the familiar. I integrated the former while proceeding despite the latter. This discernment, this ability to separate valuable feedback from simple resistance, this enabled me to improve vision without abandoning it, to refine execution without retreating from purpose. Your independent advance requires this same discernment, this same ability to hear criticism without being halted by it, this same capacity to integrate useful feedback while proceeding despite mere resistance. Second, you must develop unwavering inner certainty while maintaining outer adaptability. Conviction does not preclude adjustment. When I faced the combined armies of Austria and Russia at Austerlitz, my strategic vision remained fixed to defeat these forces decisively and force a favorable peace. But my tactical approach adapted continuously based on battlefield developments. This combination, this fusion of unwavering purpose with flexible execution, this enabled victory against superior numbers. Your independent advance demands this same balance, this same fusion of fixed conviction with flexible approach. This same understanding that standing alone with your vision does not mean rigidity in its execution. Third, you must create your own validation when external confirmation is temporarily absent. Internal certainty must sustain when external support falters. When I was exiled to Elba after my first abdication, when former allies abandoned me, when supporters distanced themselves, when the world declared Napoleon finished, I did not surrender to this external verdict. I maintained internal validation of my vision, my capability, my destiny. This self-generated certainty, this refusal to allow external abandonment to create internal doubt, this enabled the remarkable comeback that followed. Your independent advance requires this same self-validation, this same capacity to generate internal certainty when external confirmation is absent. This same refusal to allow the temporary desertion of support to create permanent abandonment of vision. Fourth, you must maintain perspective beyond the immediate. Temporary isolation is exactly that, temporary. When I faced moments of significant opposition, of collapsed consensus, of wavering support, I did not mistake the present for the permanent. I maintained perspective beyond the immediate crisis. I understood that today's isolation could become tomorrow's vindication if I held course with clarity and conviction. Your independent advance demands this same perspective, this same refusal to mistake the momentary for the permanent, this same understanding that history's verdict is not determined by today's polls. Finally, you must cultivate the courage that standing alone requires. Independence is not merely a strategic choice, it is an act of genuine courage. When I returned from Elba to reclaim power, landing on French soil with a tiny force against a restored monarchy with a full army, I demonstrated not just strategic boldness, but genuine courage. I risked everything, position, freedom, life itself, on the conviction that my vision was right, even when conventional calculation declared it madness. Your independent advance requires this same courage, this same willingness to risk significant loss for significant purpose, this same understanding that standing alone is not merely strategic, but fundamentally courageous. Remember this: history does not remember those who waited for unanimous approval. It remembers those who proceeded based on conviction, with support when available, without it when necessary. I did not reshape Europe by requiring universal agreement before action. I did not build an empire by demanding constant consensus. I advanced based on vision, on judgment, on conviction, sometimes with widespread support, sometimes virtually alone. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the conqueror. This is how history is made, while the conventional wait for comfortable consensus that never arrives for the truly significant. Stand alone if you must. Advance without universal support if necessary. Proceed based on conviction rather than consensus. This is how the seemingly impossible becomes merely the difficult, and the difficult becomes merely the done. Legacy isn't fame. It isn't wealth. It isn't even power. Legacy is impact that outlasts your existence. It is contribution that continues when you cannot. It is influence that remains when you are gone. I, Napoleon, did not merely seek personal glory. I did not simply pursue individual achievement. I built systems, structures, institutions, and ideas that have outlived me by centuries. My physical empire eventually fell, yet my influence continues through legal codes, educational systems, governmental structures, and military innovations that still shape nations today. Here's what most people don't understand. The greatest achievement is not what you personally accomplish. It is what you set in motion that continues accomplishing without you. It is not the height you reach, but the foundation you build that others will stand upon long after you're gone. When I created the Napoleonic Code, establishing a legal system based on clear, rational principles rather than contradictory traditions and arbitrary privileges, I was not simply solving a contemporary problem. I was building a framework that would bring justice and order to societies for generations. This code still forms the basis of law in dozens of nations across multiple continents, influencing the lives of hundreds of millions of people who may never know my name. This is the essence of true legacy, creating impact that transcends both your lifetime, and your identity. But let me ask you this. Are you building only for your time, or also for time beyond you? Are you creating what will end with your effort, or what will continue through its own momentum? Are you focused merely on personal achievement, or also on lasting contribution? The ordinary mind builds for immediate results. The extraordinary mind builds for enduring impact. When I reformed the French educational system, creating the lycées and grandes écoles that still exist today, I was not merely addressing current educational deficiencies. I was establishing institutions that would develop human potential for centuries. These schools have produced generations of leaders, thinkers, scientists, and creators who have themselves generated contributions beyond calculation. This multiplication effect, this creation of systems that continue creating value beyond your direct control, this is the true measure of extraordinary impact. Your vision, your goals, your ambitions, they all deserve this same perspective. This same extension beyond immediate achievement to lasting contribution. This same focus not just on what you can accomplish directly, but on what you can set in motion permanently. Understand this. The impact you can personally generate, however significant, is finite. The impact you can initiate through systems, through institutions, through ideas that outlast you, this is potentially infinite. When I established the Bank of France, creating financial stability after years of revolutionary chaos, I was not simply solving an immediate economic crisis. I was building an institution that would provide monetary foundation for generations of prosperity, an organization that still functions more than 2 centuries after its creation. This institutional legacy, this building of structures that continue, functioning beyond your direction, this creates impact exponentially greater than even the most impressive personal achievements. Your ambitions should have this same expanded horizon, this same focus beyond what you can personally control to what you can permanently establish, this same understanding that systems outlast individuals, institutions outlast founders, ideas outlast their creators, the amateur seeks personal glory, the master builds lasting legacy. When I reorganized the French administrative system, creating the prefect model that centralized and standardized governance across diverse regions, I was not merely improving current efficiency. I was establishing a governmental approach that would be adopted by nations around the world, a system so effective that elements of it continue functioning in modern states today. This exportable innovation, this creation of approaches that others adopt and adapt, this exponentially multiplies impact beyond what any individual could generate directly. Your vision should have this same quality, this same potential for adoption beyond your control, this same capacity to influence far beyond your direct reach. But building legacy that transcends your existence requires specific mindsets, specific approaches, specific practices that the ordinary never develop and the extraordinary cultivate. Religiously, first you must think in principles, not merely practices. Principles transcend circumstances. Practices are limited by them. When I developed military strategies that revolutionized warfare, I was not simply creating tactics for specific battles. I was establishing principles of maneuver, of concentration of force, of flexibility in execution, that military leaders would study and apply for centuries. These principles have transcended the specific conditions of my era because they address fundamental realities of conflict that remain relevant despite technological change. This principle-based approach, this focus on underlying truths, rather than surface applications, this creates legacy that adapts to changing conditions rather than becoming obsolete with them. Your contribution must have this same foundation, this same grounding in principles that transcend current circumstances, this same connection to fundamental truths that will remain relevant when today's specific conditions are long forgotten. Second, you must build for continuity beyond your control. Legacy requires systems that can function without your direct guidance. When I established the lycée system of education, I did not design it to require my personal oversight. I created organizational structures, curriculum approaches, and administrative systems that could function, adapt, and evolve under the leadership of others. This institutional independence, this capacity to continue without the founder's ongoing direction, this is what has enabled these schools to serve France for more than 2 centuries. Your legacy demands this same self-sustaining quality, this same ability to function beyond your direct control, this same institutional independence that allows continuation without your constant guidance. Third, you must address fundamental human needs that will not change with time. Lasting impact requires connection to enduring requirements. When I created the Napoleonic Code, I based it on principles of clarity, fairness, and rationality in law that meet fundamental human needs for justice, for predictability, for equal treatment. These needs do not change with fashion or technology. They are essential requirements of functioning society in any era. This connection to enduring human needs, this addressing of requirements that transcend time, this is why this legal system remains relevant centuries after its creation. Your legacy requires this same connection, this same addressing of fundamental needs rather than temporary wants, this same focus on what will remain essential rather than what is merely current. Fourth, you must cultivate successors who can carry forward and even improve your creation. Legacy requires continuation through others. When I developed military leaders, I did not simply train them to execute my orders. I educated them to understand my principles, to apply my approaches, to think as I thought, but in their own circumstances. Many became exceptional commanders in their own right, extending and adapting my military innovations beyond what I could have directly implemented. Your legacy demands this same development of successors, this same transfer of principle rather than mere practice, this same cultivation of those who can not only continue but enhance what you have begun. Finally, you must build with materials that endure. Legacy requires components that survive the erosion of time. When I created institutions, whether governmental, educational, financial, or military, I built them on foundations of rational principle, clear structure, and alignment with fundamental human needs. These enduring materials, these components resistant to the corrosion of changing fashion, these have allowed these creations to survive long after more trendy innovations have crumbled. Your legacy requires this same quality of construction, this same use of enduring materials, this same building with components that resist rather than surrender to time's erosion. Remember this, the true measure of your impact is not what exists because you maintain it. It is what continues because you started it, not what functions under your control, but what thrives beyond your reach. I did not limit my ambition to personal achievement, impressive as that might have been. I extended it to lasting contribution, to systemic impact, to legacy that would continue influencing the world long after Napoleon Bonaparte had become a historical figure rather than a living force. This is the horizon of the truly extraordinary. This is the vision of the genuinely imperial mind. This is how impact transcends individual limitation and achieves something approaching immortality. Build systems, create institutions, establish principles, develop successors. Leave a legacy that makes your personal achievements, however significant, merely the foundation for what follows. This is how you transcend the finite boundaries of individual accomplishment and create impact limited only by time itself. All victory begins inside. This is the final truth, the ultimate principle, the essential understanding that transforms dreams into achievements, visions into reality, ambitions into conquests. I, Napoleon, did not reshape Europe through external power alone. I did not build an empire merely through force of arms. I conquered first within, mastering my fears, disciplining my thoughts, harnessing my emotions, focusing my will, and only then did I conquer without. Here's what most people don't understand. External. Achievement is merely the visible manifestation of internal conquest. The battles that determine your destiny are not fought in the world, they are fought in your mind. The obstacles that truly block your advance are not external circumstances, they are internal limitations. When I rose from obscurity to become Emperor of France, the most formidable enemies I defeated were not Austrian armies or Russian forces. They were the internal foes that defeat most who aspire to greatness: doubt, fear, laziness, distraction, inconsistency, and surrender to conventional thinking. These are the true adversaries of extraordinary achievement. These are the genuine opponents of imperial ambition. These are the real enemies you must defeat before you can begin conquering the world beyond yourself. But let me ask you this: have you mastered the territory within? Have you conquered the landscape of your own mind? Have you defeated the internal enemies that would surrender your dreams before the external battle has even begun? The ordinary person focuses exclusively on external obstacles. The extraordinary person conquers internal limitations first. When I was a young officer, unknown and unproven, I did not wait for circumstances to grant me opportunity. I did not expect the world to recognize potential it could not yet see. I mastered myself first. I conquered my natural inclination toward leisure. I defeated my desire for social approval. I subjugated my need for immediate gratification. I disciplined my mind to study when others relaxed, to analyze when others amused themselves, to prepare when others played. This internal conquest, this mastery of self before attempting mastery of circumstance, this created the foundation upon which all subsequent external achievements were built. Your ambitions, your goals, your vision, they all require this same sequence, this same conquest from within before conquest without, this same victory over self before victory over circumstance. Understand this: external conditions are rarely ideal. Circumstances seldom perfectly align. Opportunities rarely present themselves in obvious form. The world does not arrange itself for your convenience or coordinate itself for your advancement. This reality, this persistent imperfection of external conditions, this is why internal conquest must precede external achievement. You must become the force that shapes circumstances rather than the object shaped by them. When I faced the established powers of Europe, nations with greater resources, larger populations, longer traditions, the decisive advantage was not material, it was mental. I had mastered myself more completely than my opponents had mastered themselves. I had conquered fear, doubt, convention, and limitation within before I attempted to conquer without. This internal mastery, this self-conquest that precedes worldly conquest, this is the most essential yet least acknowledged prerequisite for extraordinary achievement. Your vision demands this same foundation, this same internal victory before external advance, this same mastery of self before mastery of circumstance. The amateur focuses on changing conditions. The master focuses on changing themselves. When I was exiled to Elba after my first abdication, when external circumstances seemed to have definitively ended my imperial ambitions, I did not surrender internally. I maintained mastery of my thoughts, my emotions, my resolve. I refused to accept external defeat as internal reality. I preserved the conquered territory within, even when the territory without had been lost. This maintenance of internal conquest, this refusal to allow external circumstance to determine internal condition, this enabled the remarkable comeback that followed, the 100 days that demonstrated how completely self-mastery can overcome seemingly insurmountable external obstacles. Your journey will include setbacks, defeats, moments when external circumstances seem aligned against you. Your response in these moments, your ability to maintain internal conquest even when external advance is temporarily halted, this will determine whether setback becomes merely delay or definitive defeat. But conquering from within requires specific disciplines, specific practices, specific internal achievements that the ordinary never develop, and the extraordinary cultivate religiously. First, you must master your thoughts. The mind undisciplined becomes the mind defeated. When I planned campaigns, when I developed strategies, when I made decisions that would determine the fate of nations, I did not allow my thinking to wander, to scatter, to become distracted by the irrelevant. I developed extraordinary mental discipline, the ability to focus completely on the essential, to concentrate fully on the objective, to think with clarity and precision under conditions that would have fragmented lesser minds. This mental mastery, this conquest of thought before conquest of territory, this created the strategic innovations, the tactical brilliance, the decisive advantage that external resources alone could never have provided. Your achievement requires this same discipline, this same mastery of mind, this same ability to focus thought with laser precision on what matters most while filtering out the constant noise of the irrelevant. Second, you must conquer fear, not by eliminating it, that is neither possible nor desirable, but by mastering your relationship with it. When I led troops into battle, when I made decisions that carried mortal risk, when I advanced strategies that conventional wisdom considered mad, I did not do so without fear. I did so with complete mastery of fear. I recognized its presence. I acknowledged its message. But I refused to grant it authority over my choices, my actions, my advance. This relationship with fear, this ability to experience it without being governed by it, this is perhaps the most essential internal conquest required for extraordinary external achievement. Your ambitions demand this same mastery, this same transformed relationship with fear, this same ability to feel it without following it, to experience it without obeying it, to acknowledge it without surrendering to it. Third, you must defeat the need for immediate gratification. The imperial mind trades present comfort for future greatness. When I studied military strategy as a young officer, when I mastered multiple languages to access knowledge not available in French, when I analyzed historical campaigns to extract their lessons, I was not experiencing immediate pleasure. I was sacrificing present comfort for future capability. I was conquering the natural human desire for easy reward, now in service of extraordinary achievement later. This mastery of impulse, this victory over the tyranny of the immediate, this internal conquest, enables external achievements that remain, forever invisible to those enslaved by present comfort. Your vision requires this same discipline, this same mastery of immediate impulse, this same willingness to delay gratification in service of greater future reward. Fourth, you must overcome the need for constant approval. The extraordinary often face temporary isolation. When I implemented strategies that violated conventional military wisdom, when I advanced policies that challenged established political thought, when I introduced innovations that disrupted traditional approaches, I did not receive immediate approval. I faced skepticism, resistance, even mockery. I had to conquer the natural human desire for constant validation in order to advance ideas that would eventually reshape history. This independence from approval, this freedom from the constant need for validation, this internal conquest enables external innovations that consensus-bound thinking could never produce. Your ambitions demand this same liberation, this same freedom from approval dependency, this same willingness to advance based on conviction rather than consensus. Finally, you must master consistency. The greatest plans mean nothing without persistent execution. When I governed France, when I built institutions that still exist today, when I implemented reforms that transformed a nation, I did not do so through sporadic effort or inconsistent attention. I maintained relentless focus on key objectives. I drove implementation with persistent energy. I demanded consistent execution from myself before requiring it from others. This conquest of inconsistency, this mastery of persistent execution, this Internal discipline enables external achievements that sporadic effort, however brilliant, could never produce. Your vision requires this same consistency, this same persistent execution, this same day-after-day advance that accumulates into extraordinary achievement, while intermittent effort produces only occasional progress. Remember this: the world is full of potential that remains forever unrealized, of ambition that never becomes achievement, of dreams that never become reality, not primarily because of external obstacles, but because of internal limitations that remain unconquered. I did not reshape history because circumstances favored me. I reshaped history because I had first reshaped myself. I had conquered from within, mastering thought, transcending fear, defeating impulse, liberating from approval, embodying consistency, before I attempted to conquer without. This is the path of the extraordinary. This is the way of the imperial mind. This is how the seemingly impossible becomes merely the difficult, and the difficult becomes merely the done. Conquer from within, then conquer the world. Master yourself, then master your circumstances. Defeat your internal limitations, then defeat your external obstacles. This is the ultimate principle of achievement. This is the final secret of conquest. This is how dreams become destiny, and ambition becomes empire. You already have what it takes. Now, go prove it.